Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Campus Dialogues, a Muslim Views production in affiliation with MuslimFin. I'm your host Ali Sali, and we're inviting you back to a fantastic episode again this evening. And here to introduce our guest is my good friend and colleague, Siraj Buzik. Siraj?
Ali, assalamu alaikum. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, good to be back.
It's good to be back in studio.
Yeah, 2025, new year.
2025, that's what they're calling it now. So inshallah, we hope it's going to be a good year. But yeah, we're happy to be back. And tonight again, another episode. And we're thrilled to have in studio Khalid Abdullah, a distinguished business leader with over 30 years of experience. And as the owner and head of Qatar Strategic Investments, Khalid has driven growth and innovation in private equity and asset management. He has also held senior roles, including Group CEO of JSE listed company, where he played a key role in transforming the organization. And beyond business, Khalid is a passionate philanthropist, raising funds for community initiatives, supporting children, women, and the underprivileged. So today, inshallah, we'll hear from Khalid about his career, leadership insights, and his impact on both business and society. Khalid, welcome to the show.
Shukran for having me, and assalamu alaikum to all the listeners, and happy to be here.
Khalid, we're so excited. We probably want to jump into a discussion with you. But before we start that, perhaps you can give us some background. I mean, I know I've summarized a bit of it, but maybe give us some insight into who Khalid Abdullah is.
Oh, it's a long story. Well, I grew up in Harfield Village, so a lot of the readers and listeners, I'm sure, will understand Harfield Village. It was a mini District 6 in Claremont. It's basically... it's right next to a church where I grew up in 2nd Avenue. I went to Livingston High School. Obviously, the Group Areas Act came into effect, and when I was 15, 16, we had to move from Claremont, which was a lovely area. I mean, we grew up in a multiracial, multicultural environment. My dad had some business there, a movie house there, which we got involved in. That's where I started learning a lot of my business skills and that. We then moved, obviously, to Rylands Athlone. My brother and I, he was about 2 years older than me. We could never get used to the environment as much. We used to play sport a lot. I used to play sport for Claywoods in William Herbert. I used to play with Mark Williams, the guy that used to score all the goals for Bafana. So him and I played twin strikers for Claywoods for many, many years while we were in Claremont, and for school as well. When I moved, obviously, I started playing with Thornhill, and I was scouted when I was 17 years old to play soccer overseas.
Wow.
Those days, getting work visas was complicated. My dad said, you need to go study. Obviously, it became complicated work. To study that time, it was difficult. I did go to university, but then to fund it, I studied part-time and did articles part-time as well over at the accounting firm. I also worked weekends in a hardware for many years, so I had kind of 2-3 jobs while studying to kind of get through the years. But alhamdulillah, today I've got 5 qualifications, including an accounting honors, a CTA, an MBA from UCT, and I also got a project management from UCT. So I believe I've equipped myself for the times that had to come afterwards. You never stop learning, and I still read quite a lot. But things have gone podcast way I see now, so I guess this is where we are today. And I guess I still see youngsters, instead of wanting to read, they listen to things. It's visual aids kind of thing more. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. And I mean, some people take in more that way. Or they can multitask while listening to something, they can watch something else, whatever. So for me, I kind of, then when I finished articles, I stayed with a firm called BDO. I became the managing director of the consulting arm in Cape Town. But then I moved into, always being an entrepreneur, moved into entrepreneurial environment, joined a big group, started from the bottom up. I helped build a company that runs currently all the hospitals in the Western Cape, the hospitals and clinics, put in all these software systems and that, and made sure it's successful. Kind of grew with the group to the point that I became a CEO of a listed environment. I'm also one of the only people that listed 2 companies in the same year by the JSE. The JSE awarded me for doing that, and also for getting consistent results. And I guess the one thing I do like is to help others kind of come through the system and mentoring and making sure the team is built and grows with you, you know. So it's an all-inclusive kind of person I think I wanted to be, which I think...
Holly, just listening to your story, like I take it from your upbringing, working part-time, studying, doing sports. That's probably a huge impact on who you are today in terms of how you go about business, entrepreneurship, etc.
Yeah, so again, when I said I grew up in Claremont, you learned lots of hard lessons there. Claremont was or Harfield Village was a very diversified. I mean, we used to see the Koens, the Klopse. You integrate with everybody. I mean, I always wanted to be part of the Koens and Klopse. They were in our road. My friends would belong to them. And you learn lessons because it was also gang infested in those days. But it was fair fighting. It wasn't somebody comes with a gun and somebody comes with a knife. It was fair, you know. And you had to survive. And being that age, you kind of stay with cliques or whatever the case is. But it taught you a lot of lessons about how to stand up for yourself. And I was always small built, so you had to make sure you could cope. And not to say that you got to fight with everybody, but you got to be able to either have a sweet tongue or whatever to talk your way out of a problem. But those are the kind of things that happen. And also working, the discipline comes with it. Nothing came easy. I mean, my dad always say, you know, you've got to put in the effort to be able to see the rewards, you know. And and nothing is too big for you. And secondly, also, you must not have too much pride either. I could never understand what he meant. Because, I mean, you know, you want to make sure, the pride comes in that you must be able to tackle anything. Doesn't matter what, because there's a learning in it and you grow with it. So as long as there's an opportunity for you, you take it and you move forward with it because the next opportunity will come from there. So for me, there's a lot of lessons in that way, trying to find balanced time, find the life balance, your friends, because, you know, I've also got friends for 40 plus years, and friends and close associates. Those don't just happen. You've got to put time into it. There's the effort that, you know, it's reciprocity. So for me, a lot of my friends, we grew up together. We then got married within a year from other. We had kids. Okay, so sometimes we don't see each other, but we always kind of come back together. So those are all lessons about how to move forward. And you know, you want to make sure that you got family and friends that you can count on, you know.
That was one of my questions I was going to ask you. You've achieved so a lot in the last couple of years. How do you find that balance between doing what you're doing and family life?
Okay, so in fact, I was telling Ali earlier on. In the early days, I used to travel quite a lot because that's what business was about. You know, you can't sit behind the desk. No matter what business you're in,
that's where networking.
You have to get out. You have to get out, see the people, greet the people, say hello to them, and make sure you understand what's going on. Understand from the bottom to the top, the tea lady to the other executives, because each one has a story.
Correct.
And some of them will teach you something about the business that you maybe didn't know. So you must open your mind up in that way. And I think those are the kind of things that you've got to be very sensitive to. But find the life-work balance. I've got 3 kids. I was a present dad. I made sure that I made time for them also. If I missed 5 of their sports games over their schooling careers, it's a lot. I used to make sure for my girls and my son, I'd go to these things, make sure I'm there for the nappy changes and bathing. I mean, it wasn't a female thing. For me, it was a shared duty. So for me, those are the kind of things that I think, you know, we kind of try and strive for and find, sometimes with difficulty, but there's times that you sacrifice and times that you got to put things in perspective. But what sacrifice you put in, then you reap the rewards and benefits afterwards.
Khalid, just listening to you talk, what I pick up from what you're saying is that the relationships that you've built over the years as a youngster and throughout your career and through your life and even in your personal life seems to be the driving factor for you. And do you feel like it's the relationships that you've built with your friends and maybe within your professional life that has allowed you to achieve this type of success?
I think so. I think if I look around, you know, sometimes you look at your friends, you look at your family, like my wife and the kids and that, you learn from each of them, right? And they're all very dear and close to me. All my friends, we kind of struggle the same way. And that's why we probably congregated or got together. It's like a magnet drawn us together. We were meant to be together. We struggled together, did certain things together, grew together, and today we can still laugh about what happened then. unorthodox stuff, which I don't even want to put on the podcast, but we've kind of learned, and alhamdulillah, all of them have succeeded in their own way, and that we are still quite close. I mean, I speak to them on a daily basis, and if any of us need anything, doesn't matter what, we will drop anything to help each other, and I think that is something that I'm very grateful for. Obviously, my family, my wife has been a support. I think she's probably one of the smartest people I know. My kids teach me every day still, because they come with a different perspective. And sometimes for us to see the future, you need to be able to talk to the youngsters of today. If you speak to the older generation, they don't know what's going to come. They know of the past. And if you want to see where you want to be in 5 to 10 years' time, if you talk to the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they will give you the hint of where things are going. You may not immediately see it, but you need to open your eyes and ears. And I think that's why you should learn and listen to everybody out there. Everybody's got this perspective and idea of where things are.
You actually raise a very good point, because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. With your leadership experience across, the diverse industries, how do you see South African businesses adapting to the challenges of globalized economy, and what key traits should leaders focus on to thrive in this environment?
South Africa is a great country. Yeah. I mean, whenever I travel, and I'm sure you guys too, when people hear I'm from Cape Town, their eyes light up. They kind of say, yo, but you're Cape Town, from South Africa. Okay, you get obviously certain parts of the world, you say from South Africa, you say, oh, Africa. Yes. But the people who know, Cape Town is probably number one in the world. I mean, where people want to come and retire, etc. Obviously, the political environment is a bit uncertain and unstable. Okay, we've got a new GNU that's been happening now, which I think is still in its learning stages, and we're not used to it. Because obviously we fought for a certain change, and the ANC is still there, but it's not what it was. And we're hoping that it is now what it is. The people have spoken. And I think the uncertainty within the politics need to be resolved. And I think the companies, obviously there's a lot of private sector business, which must happen, but there's a lot of integration between private and public. You can't do without the other. Private sector can only survive with public sector, because the infrastructure must be, because all the people go to the public hospitals otherwise. So I think from an economic point of view, South Africa is well placed. It's placed in a way. Firstly, it's probably in Africa, it's a platform, and it's a springboard into Africa.
It's like a gateway.
It's a gateway to Africa. Our resources, natural resources, is second to none. I mean, Igoli, Joburg, the old, Kimberley, where it started. There's still a lot of resources in the country. I think that we just need to think a little bit harder and further into maybe adding a little bit more value to the raw materials that we're sending out. But I think those are the kind of things. It's not simple to fix, but politically makes it, the red tape, I think, is a little bit of a problem. And until the political environment stabilizes and people buy into it, because now you get people who are opposed to GNU, you get people who love the GNU, we don't know how it's going to work out. We hope it's going to work out for the greater good. Cape Town obviously is a little bit a separate pocket from the rest of the world, but with the last elections, nobody saw what was coming. I think everybody was surprised. There's new parts that popped up from nowhere. So I think if we can just get the political environment stabilized, the power generation seems to be okay now. Solar energy, we seem to be the leader in Africa, because a lot of companies in South Africa are providing the solar energy into Africa. So those are kind of, there is a lot of good things. It needs to just be consolidated, and the stability needs to come back. And obviously, employment. That needs to happen. Without employment, security becomes a problem. So it's a bit of a domino effect, which I think, if we don't resolve those small things, it's going to be very hard. People are going to start getting hungry, and they're going to have to eat it. They're going to start finding different means of finding funding, whichever, legally or illegally. And that's the sad thing about it all. But South Africa is a country second to none, I think. It's difficult for anybody who's grown up here to actually want to leave the country. Our kids will say to us, they will go overseas, work overseas, but they will stay in South Africa.
No place like Cape Town, correct.
Yeah. Even though the opportunities overseas opens up too. Yeah. But you'll always have a heart down here, or at some point you'll come back here. And I think South Africa is a great country. It's just, there is, like I said, the niggles, but every country has the niggles. I mean, if you just open any media, if we listen to go into any news network, every country has the issues.
Correct.
There isn't one country that doesn't have. The only countries that don't have, they're not relevant. But the countries that are relevant, they have the issues. I mean, there's wars all over the case. I mean, the Gaza-Israel issue, America has just gone through election. Trump was back. Who would have thought? I mean, he's a convicted guy, unfortunately, but he's going to go back. Now, France is having the issues. Canada's prime minister is. It's all over. So yes, we do have our issues, but we're not unlike any other country. There's issues all over. But I think somebody must take the bull by the horns and make the necessary changes. I think.
Yeah, Khalid, coming back to the relationships piece, so recently we know that you traveled to Turkey and you played in a golf tournament there. And obviously you've made, fantastic, or built fantastic relationships with, people all over the world. And I'm sure that also in your career, you've developed fantastic networks, all over the world. How do you see, with your experience and your extensive experience in traveling and traveling to other countries and with your networks in other parts of the world, where do you see the greatest opportunities for South Africa to be able to get that international investments, and where are some of the biggest potential opportunities for South Africa with relation to other countries?
So I've been fortunate that I could travel overseas, and only when you start traveling you see the opportunities. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't get the opportunity to travel. So internationally, there's lots of opportunities. South Africa, I've been fortunate in that I could go to conferences overseas, whether it's tech, whether it's business or BRICS or World Economic Forums, and once you get there, you kind of rub shoulders with other entrepreneurs, but powerful and well-known ones. And the big thing for me is that sometimes you're walking next to somebody and you speak to them, and this is like a serious guy who's in the media all the time, or like a Jack Ma, for example. I mean, just to come to mind. I have breakfast with the guy and think to myself, if this guy can do it, he's just a simple man, So it's not as if he's different, but he's obviously working harder. He's applying his mind. So the opportunities comes out that way, and you obviously you must put in the time to network. I mean, network is kind of heavily underrated, but it takes time. Sometimes you sit in a dinner and you think you don't really want to be here. You should be with your family, but you have to put in those things, right? And you get to know people in that way. And opportunities you'll see in the world. I mean, I've gone to China, for example, and people have been trying to get maybe equipment. The Chinese will reverse engineer anything for you. And initially, maybe the quality wasn't there. They've improved over time because they've got 1.3, 1.4 billion people there. So the competition is a lot heavier there also. So there's a lot of international trade. I mean, South Africa trades with Germany, China, Europe. Those are some of its biggest trading, and you don't even know it, but if you just think around some of the big brands, they're all here. So there are opportunities, and also the diversity. They're trying to understand us. And we also, initially when people used to go to China, they made their mistakes because they didn't understand the culture. Now you've got to understand the culture first to understand how they operate. For example, if you were to go to China, they respect right now. If you come there and you are the CEO of a company, they will only let their CEO talk to you from a respect point of view. And if you bring your chairman, then their chairman will talk to your chairman. It doesn't kind of cross-pollinate, but that's kind of the culture that you need to get used to. I'm using that as examples, but you need to understand how that fits in.
Correct.
It's almost becomes second nature, and they assess you based on how much you know about them or otherwise. And they will open doors very easily for you and want to do business with you. So the opportunities are there. I mean, my brother, who was a simpleton also, he passed on a few years ago. He was a year and a half older than me. And he used to always say to me, he went overseas once or twice in his early days. He says, and he was in the fashion trade. He says to me, Khalid, I'm going to bring in a container of jeans. I said, okay. And then he says, no, because you will see, I'm talking about in the 80s, 90s. He says, because what's fashionable there now, in 6 to 12 months, is coming to South Africa. And he was right. But it's only because he went there and he had an eye for fashion. He could foresee that trends are going to come here. So if you just think about that, in any other industry, if you can be a year or two ahead of somebody else, it gives you a competitive edge. And that's important for you to understand. But to put the links together, you need to understand the link of the fashion in that example and how to maximize it or monetize it.
Khalid, you spoke about traveling and networking. Do you think it's easier now for our generation in terms of social media, globalization, picking up on trends like that, to get ahead and be able to pick up those type of opportunities?
With social media, I mean, you can basically sit at home and see the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not quite the same. You have to actually, to my mind, okay, maybe that's my old school coming in. You have to sometimes physically see it. But the world is your oyster today. Today, you can sit in a meeting and somebody raises a concept. You haven't got an idea. The youngsters just quickly Google it. Oh, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Now, things have globalized. So if you think of it in that way, they also got the opportunity to travel. In our day, it was expensive, or you used to, many years ago, it was by boat.
Yeah.
The flights have opened up. And these days you can go, if you're under a certain age, let's say under 25, you can probably pick up a flight for under 10,000 and to go anywhere in the world. If you're not too fussy about the seat and that kind of stuff. So the opportunities are there for them to be able to do that. And I see a lot of the younger people, they do that. They go on holiday. But for me, just to bring it back to me, I've always had a curious mind. Even when I go on holiday, and I see some incident, and I'll go and ask the guy, how does it work? How do you get this, or whatever? It wasn't, I used to mix the holiday with business, but subtly, without getting into the family's time.
Yes.
But my mind is to want to ask more and more questions, And I think the youngsters today, they prepare before they would go, before they book their flight, they will prepare to understand where they're going.
Yeah.
So by the time they get there, they already got the plan. In our days, we would go and then explore. It's a different way of learning with exploring when you get there. It's like the harder side of it. For them, everything's organized and planned. But to your point, I think the youngsters today, their minds are open. They can read up on anything. It's not going to a dictionary or otherwise. In our days, like a whole research. I remember my wife and I, when we went on a 2-3 month tour and backpacking in Europe in 1994, I think it was. We had a book with us, photos, whatever the case is. With maps and where we're going to go. So while we're in the plane, we make a note of where we're going to go, where we're going to sleep at night, and we walk and we do our thing. But also you learn that way.
It's part of the experience.
Part of the experience, exactly. And sometimes you come to a place, you're tired, and you can't find a place to sleep, and you just sleep in a pension or a smaller one-star hotel just to get your head down.
Yes.
But that's part of the fun and the growth also. So, but for the youngsters today who are able to travel, I mean, their minds open up. You can see they're very different people when they come back. So they grow also in that instance.
The reason why I asked you that question is I've listened to your backstory and you know when you grew up in terms of like your hardships that you've tackled. And the new generation with social media, etc. But do you think the new generation is a bit soft? If I look at my kids, we try to provide them with the best things or things that we never had when we grew up. So they're going to better schools. We kind of shield them from some of the things that we've gone through growing up, which made us what we are today. Do you think that has an impact on this new generation?
Look, it is. Maybe that was a perspective I had.
Yeah.
I'll be, and that how we grew up was a lot harder. But if you think about the generations before us, it was even harder for them.
Correct.
And they worked hard and sweated. I remember 5 o'clock in the morning, shops open, close at 12 o'clock, etc., etc. They made it easier for us. And because we have kids, we want to make sure that we want to give our kids the best.
Yeah.
So it's not actually our kids' fault.
Correct.
We're giving them the best, but then again, if you were to ask somebody, which I haven't asked the question, but sometimes I try and find perspective. I try and look at things from different perspective. If you were to ask you, but things are easy for you, but I didn't. It's not my fault. You made it easy for me. So, you got to think of it in that way. And we want to make sure that they also get a step ahead.
Correct.
And in South Africa, again, also there is the old economy and the old money and the new money. Our kids have a lot to catch up with. I mean, at least 5-6 generations. I mean, if you know, since apartheid has changed, I mean, the economy hasn't changed in 1994. It was everything else. At least we can go and play and do whatever we want to now, go to the beaches. But the financial economy is still sit in the old. So our kids need to be able to compete in future with whoever they do. And we want to at least make sure they get good schooling. So when they get to university, they can hold their own. So it's not their fault that, but for them also, things have changed. They're working in a more dynamic environment now. So things are difficult still for them, because if they're not savvy with iPads and how to research, they're going to fall behind also. So things have evolved, and that's exactly the word, this evolved. And for them it's difficult, but in a different way. So
Khalid, you're a business leader. You are also a mentor to many students and people and entrepreneurs. And I was listening to you talk about your meeting or your lunch that you had with people like Jack Ma. And when you sat down with him and you sat down with him at the table, you said, this is just a normal guy, and someone like he can do it, I can do it too. So as a mentor, is that the type of message that you try to get across to the people that you are mentoring?
So UCT sends me a few, because I did my MBA at UCT. Okay. So they obviously give a list to some of the MBA students, and the students can choose names who they want to talk to as a mentor kind of thing. So I do mentor some of the students regularly. And it's all about a confidence thing. Okay. Sometimes you get somebody and you say, but this guy's a smart, okay. And you can hear him talking. And I say, but whatever you tell me now, just stay with it. Just be focused, because what you're doing, you're actually doing the right stuff. They just need to be told that. Because sometimes they feel lost because there's so much things happening in their lives or otherwise, and they just get overwhelmed and overawed, and you got to just bring them back. And sometimes also, you got to make it simple for them, because there's an objective. So you can make your objective difficult or simple. Now, obviously, if you want MBA and you want to get a cum laude, and that's a different story. Then you got to make sure that person understands there's more effort and work to be done. But the MBA is not about just to me and from colleagues that I worked with and also did the MBA with. It's not about the getting the result at 90%. We can all get that. But sometimes if you do that, then you're missing the actual learnings about the interaction and relationships with the other people in your class. Because that's where a lot of the learning happens.
And network for future networking.
No, exactly. And each of those people come with their own strengths. Correct. So they will put you, for example, at the MBA, they will put you in a team of 6 people. But they'll make sure that this is the way they work. They won't put any minority in there. They'll make sure there's at least 2 people of a diverse culture or a dynamic.
Okay.
For example, they'll maybe never put 1 female with 5 men. Okay. They'll make sure there's 2. So that person also has a voice. Otherwise, the person can shy away. I'm using these as examples. There's other kind of dynamics.
Good example.
But each of them have, the one may be an engineer, the one may be a doctor, the one may be a teacher, but they have different perspectives, right? And one of the lessons that I learned at my MBA was the systems thinking way. So I think systemically, where your body is actually a system. I mean, if something goes wrong with your kidney, it's going to affect the other parts of your body. And you need to understand that effect. Now, doctors are taught this, obviously, in medicine, but for businesses, they don't teach them. But here, that made me see how things changes over time. So if something is failing, it's going to affect something else, and you need to change it along the way. So each of these people have a different perspective of life. So like one of the lecturers said in the first few days, he says, if you take an orange and you cut an orange in 8, just randomly, and you put them in front of you, each of them look very different. I'm talking about the actual, the granules on the inside, not the skin. They look very, but it's the same, it tastes the same, it's exactly the same orange. But because it's different perspectives, so you've got to look at things from different perspectives, and that is the different thing. So sometimes people say, but what's that person doing on the board? They're only a teacher. That person comes with a perspective that it's important also to get the diversified a view on a board or on a project or at the team. Because sometimes you get somebody who's, for example, an accountant. They want to just see the numbers and make profit in it. But then the teacher will say, yeah, but how are the people going to learn? How in 3 years' time, it's not about the profits, or somebody will say, or the doctor will say, but how's the people's mental health? They can't just drive, or work hard. And mental health, and that becomes a big issue. I mean, right now, in business, it's not about money anymore. Money will make itself if you make sure your people are happy. The environment must be good. It must be an environment people want to come to work. Because they spend 8 to 10 hours every day. And if people don't get up wanting to go to work, or they have to go to work because they're getting a salary, that's not what you want. You want to employ people because of their skills. You don't employ them because they must take instruction. Then you've lost the plot. You must be able to employ people because of the value they bring. And each one has their own value. Because sometimes you sit in a meeting, I've sat in many meetings, and maybe try to chair the meeting, and then we think we're going to go this way. And then somebody comes with a lifting idea, but have you thought of it this way? Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's consider doing it this way. Because you never know, because everybody's worldview is different. The way you grew up, and if I were to ask you a question independently, and you get two different answers. If I had to ask you a real life example, because you see it from how you were brought up, and your upbringing affects your decision making down the line, and so does yours, and it may be very different. Besides even your qualification, it's just if you were to speak to somebody, as an example from the Cape Flats, like Manenberg, whatever, the same question somebody else, they'll answer you in very different ways. The one will maybe be more concerned about putting food on his table. Because he's got to go to work and get the money. The other one is in a different area will have a different circumstance. So there's no one size fits all. So you need to understand that when you're mentoring people also, because those are the kind of history that they bring into it. So.
And that probably gives to the perspective as well. Khalid, I wanted to ask you with regards to, you mentioned companies are profit driven, and then have you seen a change in business where companies are valuing people more in terms of what they bring, in terms of just being profit-driven? Have you seen a change over the years?
Look, I have seen a change over the years, and the companies that are long-term
orientated,
who think of long-term viability and sustainability, those are the ones that look after the people.
Okay.
If they're there for the short term, it's a different story. And unfortunately, the way things work is that managers and executives get incentivized differently. So if you bring in an executive or manager for 2 or 3 years, he's going to make decisions for the short term. Okay. And he's going to spend according to to make sure that at the end of the year, he performs. But once he's gone in 2 or 3 years, some of the skeletons come out of the woodwork, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So you have to, and you'll always see now these days that they talk about mental health, and they talk about accountability, and they talk about a good environment. And I gave an example that I met a tech CEO yesterday. And he said to me, he just came back from a psychologist. I was like surprised. I mean, people don't openly talk about these things. And he says, no, he has got a contract with a psychologist that every staff member can just go and see that person on a weekly basis so they can have a free space. So when they come to work, they don't have to skinner and talk about everything else, about their personal problems. They can get on with work. So you can see how the value can come to the company. You spend a little bit, but you're actually getting more back. So I think those are the kind of things that the person must consider. And I have seen a change, but it's the new generation, the thinking that's coming through now, where you have to look after your people first. Because if you do that, everything else falls in place. And people must be happy. They spend more time at work than they do at home. Awake.
Yeah, no, 100%. Khalid, I wanted to ask you, as a business leader and somebody who does mentoring, from a business and opportunities perspective, do you think the field is now level in terms of people from different backgrounds and dynamics have the same opportunities to become successful in business?
Look, the fields are not fully leveled yet. As I said to you, we're about 4 or 5 generations behind. And it's the reality. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing you and I can do about it. It's a political, I won't call it the hiccup, but the stumble block that happened in 94. Yeah. I mean, we didn't have economic transformation. It was more. But I think the youngsters of the day, they're equipping themselves a lot better to deal with it. So inshallah, they will catch up in due course. And I think the way they think these days, I mean, I look at my kids, they try and either save money or try and invest in money to make a little bit more. My son, they said to me, he's got a little bit of money now, he wants to invest it. Because, you can't just leave it in the bank. So I discussed it and we put a plan. But the fact that he's actually thinking about it in that light, and the youngsters of today, they also think about long term.
Yeah.
They don't actually think short term anymore. And I think that's important. Obviously, some are by the means, some are not by the means. But these that do have a little bit more, they try and save and they think a little further. Not like in the first wave of BE or otherwise. First thing the guys went to buy cars. Now they say, no, I don't need a car. I'm going to reinvest it in the business or invest it, whatever the case is. So I think the mind shift has changed. But I think the parents also have brought that culture to them mostly. And I think that's the difference,
Khalid, I think as a business leader, you are far beyond, in terms of our community, and achieved way beyond what many in our community have achieved or been able to achieve. And I think your success is quite amazing. From our side, I think we can probably continue this podcast all night and, keep asking you, so much, and we would love to have you on again, maybe for a follow-up as well. But, I'm thinking about that youngster that is now, we got the matric results last night, and we saw the Western Cape did fantastic, and some boy from Pinelands High School, I think, was the top learner in South Africa. To those matriculants, for example, who are now going out into the world, going to study, who look to someone like you, a business leader, a mentor, or look up to someone like you and say, that's what I want to be, that's who I want to be. What is some of the advice that you would give to them?
So I don't recognize myself in what you just said. I don't think I'm that kind of business leader or achieve that much. There's a lot more to achieve. But I think guidance is important. I mean, because the kids that come out of school these days, they're not fully equipped or understand what they want. You do get the guys, 40%, they know exactly where they are, or it runs in their family. The father was a lawyer, father was a doctor, and that's where they're going to go. And it's maybe the right fit for them. But you also find that sometimes they must go to university. After year 1 or year 2, they'll realize this is maybe not for me. But hopefully they've got the space to do that, because they mustn't fall out. Otherwise they don't like something and they say, or they can't afford, and that's a sad thing. Sometimes you want to do, let's say you want to do business science, because everybody's talking about business science, or medicine for that matter, and after year 1 or 2 you think, it's not quite for me, but I can't fail, I want to get through it, but they don't enjoy it. And I've seen qualified people in any profession, they finish the degree, but then they don't like it. Or they, for example, I've seen accountants who stay accountants. They will crunch numbers for the rest of their life. They haven't actually elevated themselves, not academically, but open their minds up to other opportunities. But they've got, at least they got a degree as a platform. So, I mean, my suggestion is that do any degree, but something that you can enjoy. Because if you can get a degree, it means that you can do your own research. And with media, social media and Google and AI these days, you can research anything. And at least the university, besides the degree itself, they've given you tools to be able to teach yourself. And I think that is something that people sometimes forget about. It doesn't stop at your degree. You can study further because you enjoy it. But if you don't, you can always teach yourself and research yourself into other things. But at least you've got the fallback of the degree. But the tools that you learn at university, doing the research, I mean, those essays that you do, there's a reason for it. How to go look up stuff, and that tools you'll never forget and lose. So I think, having said that, for the kids that come out of school now, I hope all of them get placed, but that's not possible. And some of them will do something they don't really enjoy, or they think they will enjoy it, but it doesn't. But the big thing is, as in life, you're going to make mistakes. I've made lots of mistakes. I mean, I admit it. I mean, that's life. But I try not to make the same mistake twice. And that's the big thing. And I think the kids today, they will make mistakes. You can't go through life without mistakes because there's lessons in it. There's maturity that comes with it and how you deal with those things. And I think all of those come into play. And right now with the schools, the one problem is over. They finish school. The next problem starts. It never stops. I mean, you guys know. You guys got full-time jobs too, and then you do this in the evening.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're creating problems for yourself by being here in the evenings. But those are the kind of things, because we must challenge ourselves. And the more you challenge yourself, the more you learn. I think that's the big issue.
And again, another episode, and we've run out of time. As usual. Khalid, Jazakallah, shukran so much. It was really amazing speaking to you and listening to your story and the advice you've given. And we do hope that we can do a follow-up episode with you, perhaps get into some of your successes as a business leader as well. But yeah, Ali?
Yeah, and there you have it, guys. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.